The Tagans really knew how to party 2 billion years ago. Jean-Luc isn't the only reason Vosh is going to Tagus 3. And Deanna Troy's bow and arrow aim is improving, but Geordie's mandolin strumming is not. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 4, Episode 20, entitled Qpid, story by Ira Steven Behr and Randy Russell, teleplay by Ira Steven Behr. This is directed by Cliff Bull. The date was 4/20/1991. What an amazing day. We have a very special guest for you, everybody. Ira Steven Behr is here. How are you, Ira?
Hello. How you doing, guys?
So good.
Doing great. I just got to point out really quick the synchronicity. This is season 4, episode 20.
On April 20th.
And it aired on 4/20.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing synchronicity.
I knew you would catch that. Right. And my thought was like, imagine if you're there in 1991 watching this episode for the first time on 4/20. You're like, this show gets me, bro. This show gets me.
Yeah.
Well, Ira, can you get us started off just telling us a bit about, first of all, Randy Russell? I don't know too much about.
Oh, no, yeah. Well, okay. What I did just for you, lovely people, is I went back. Dig this. I have my desk calendars like from all the way from 1988 to today. And I went back and found the 1990 and 1991 desk calendars and pulled them out. Wow. Just to see, because obviously I was not on the show anymore. I had left after season 3. And I just wanted to give a timeline. I thought you'd find that interesting, maybe more interesting than talking about the episode. So here it comes. This is what was happening. Now, in my life, just so you know, while all this was going on, I was in the midst of writing a feature film for Joel Silver's production company and Warner Brothers that was going to star Harrison Ford. We probably talked about this, but this is when that was happening. So all through this, everything I tell you, I was also doing rewrites on that movie. And so it was a very busy time. So here we go. Dig this. Wednesday, November 7th, 1990. The 10-year anniversary, by the way, of the death of the great Steve McQueen. Wednesday, November 7th, 1990. Go to Star Trek, talk to Pillar, is what it said. So I was nothing if not terse in my desk calendar. So what I figure is Michael was always trying to get me, to stay involved. He knew I was writing this feature, and I was also pitching another pilot at MGM. Anyway, so I went to Star Trek to talk to Pillar. Now, he had said that they were doing they had been trying to do the show about King Arthur, a Q show about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and that was going to be the gag. But he wasn't liking it at all, and he didn't want to give me the story to read. He just said, "Think about that." So that was on November 7th. Then blah blah blah. I was doing a rewrite. Blah blah blah. Tuesday, November 20th, 1990. Go to Paramount to talk to Mike about Star Trek script. So now it's like, 13 days later, 2 weeks later, and lunch with Ron Moore. So
nice.
It's amazing as I look through this book how much socializing I was doing with Ron outside of the office, even though I wasn't on the show anymore. But there's all these things: going out to lunch with Ron, going to a movie, going out to dinner with Ron and the woman he was seeing at the time, and Laura and me. It was there was a lot of love at that back then. So that was November 20th. I was still busy. Thursday, December 6th, 1990, Star Trek to discuss King Arthur, Robin Hood. So, as I recall, it was Mike's idea. And he said, well, we're both big Errol Flynn fans. We love the adventures of Robin Hood. This King Arthur thing isn't working. What about Robin Hood? And I said, oh, okay, now you hit me in my soft spot. So so let me think about that, and we'll come back and see what I could come up with. So that was the 6th of December. On December 21st, which is a Friday, Star Trek to break Q Love was the title. Q Love with staff.
Q-love.
And I remember being in the room with Jerry Taylor and Ron, and I think Brannon was there. It might have been one of the first times I met Brannon, and Joe Minoski, maybe. I don't know.
Mhm.
And so here I was coming back to. I love the title Q Love. It's it sounds like very progressive. It stands for queer loves, and the love story is about Q and Picard is a much more. They should have been the ones stooping, not Bosch and Card.
They
That's
were in
where
bed together.
Yeah.
in one scene.
that's who belonged in bed together for sure. So
So that was December 21st.
yeah. So now you could tell we're coming to the holiday season,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because then there's nothing until Thursday, December 27th, which is after Christmas. Star Trek meeting with staff. So obviously it was the second day of coming up with the story, which is normal. And then not until Monday, January 7th, 1991, Star Trek story meeting, which means that's the third, and most stories took back then 2 or 3 days to break. And as an outsider, at that point, it was just an interesting thing to look at how that writer's room worked as opposed to the writer's room I knew from the year before with Hans and Ricky and Ron and Melinda Snodgrass and Mike. So that's
what was the thing that you noticed differently about the way it worked?
Well, people didn't seem as freaking miserable as everyone did
Okay.
in the third season. Everyone had decided, except for Ron, who was so new, that everyone was going to jump ship at the end of the year. So it was a countdown, and everyone was so pissed off and so not happy with the series at the time and the direction of the series. With exceptions like yesterday's Enterprise and episodes that people like, but it was still such a difficult, and the debacle of Captain's Holiday and how that changed from what it was going to be originally, the serious show about facing one's mortality and age, and then it became this romp on Risa.
With Rom.
So
this episode
seemed
refers
much more like a normal staff. The staff writers seemed much more nervous, and when they talked in the room, they usually were shot down very quickly. I mean, you could tell the hierarchy much easier than in the writers' room, where we all just kind of sat around, and if you walked in, you couldn't really tell who was in charge, and
Okay.
So that was January 7th. That was the third and last meeting, because on Friday, January 18th, I hand in Star Trek script. So I don't know I don't know if I wrote a story for it or I didn't write a story for it. It's hard to tell, but I handed in a script. So I wrote that in about 11 days, 10 days probably. Well, 9 days probably. Handed in the Star Trek script on Friday. Now and we're almost done with this, but this one really, I wish I could remember because it just seems so not the norm. On Monday, January 28th, so that's 10 days later, meet with Rick, Mike, and Jerry. Now, I never recall ever having a story meeting with Rick, ever, on DS9 or TNG. So why? So obviously I'm not meeting with the rest of the staff. It's just Rick, Mike, and Jerry. I don't know why. Obviously I'm getting some notes because a few days later, Thursday, January 31st, I hand in the Star Trek rewrite. So that took like 2 days to rewrite whatever their notes were. And then the last thing I have on this is Thursday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. 2 weeks later, I go to Paramount to see Star Trek Castle set and watch some filming. So they were already
Nice.
filming it. And I remember coming to the set, just because I wanted to see how they were going to handle the sword fighting and how that was going to look.
That's funny because watching it, I was thinking kind of the same thing. I was assuming it was at Paramount, but it was a good set. It seemed like they put in a lot of work into building something that looked like a castle. And I'm looking at the staging of like how they're trying to maximize, not a ton of space and get the guy, sharpening the axe in the background with the dinner over here and all that. So I was kind of thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember feeling, I mean, you have to remember, I sold this movie pitch for this feature in June of 1990. And from June for the next year and a half or 2 years, it was, that crazy writing, rewriting, meetings, going all over, flying into Jackson Hole to Harrison Ford's house for me. I mean, it was just insane and being treated like shit because you were a writer in movies and it wasn't like TV. You were treated like a problem. You were the problem they had to get through before they can actually do the real work of filming. So that just consumed me. So this was like a vacation for me. It really was. The thing that killed me is, and this gives you some idea of the, at the time, what passed for Star Trek journalism. A couple of months later, I was in I think I was in a Barnes and Nobles, and I was at the magazine section, and I saw a Starlog magazine.
Nice.
And they had an article with the writer of the first writer of the episode,
Randy.
and it was this long interview, and she's talking all about Robin Hood. And as far as I knew, she wrote a story about King Arthur, that I never saw. I was never mentioned once in the article. It just sounded like she wrote Qpid, and it was like, wow, that's kind of, the kind of journalism that Star Trek deserves.
That's not the only time we've seen a story by person though talking like they wrote the whole thing. But we won't go into that. It happens.
Yeah, I mean, you just could read the credits and see who did the work, a lot of the work on this. Was Vosh part of the original game plan?
It was for me. That was one of the things. I don't know if I have no idea what the game plan was for King Arthur. It never was meant, Michael was very much, I don't want you to think about that. I don't want you to see it. It's like, I want you to have a good time doing this. So you come up with whatever you want to come up with, but let's do, how about Robin Hood? I think that'll be, so I thought, Vosh would add some, there was going to have to be a Maid Marian, there was going to have to be some kind of love affair. So it kind of made sense that that would be it. The other thing that I found really amusing was the actor who played Sir Guy of Gisborne was this actor named Clive Revel.
Yeah.
Now, when I was 10 years old, the first play I ever saw on Broadway was the musical Oliver. And Fagin was played by Clive Revel. In the movie in England, it was Ron Moody, but Clive Revel played it on Broadway and got fantastic reviews,
Wow.
right? And the Artful Dodger was played by a young actor named David Jones. Davy Jones, who then became a monkey a few years
Yeah.
later.
Davy Jones.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was fantastic as as a little kid. I didn't know who Davy Jones was, but whoever that kid was playing the Artful Dodger. And then a few years later up at camp, I played the Artful Dodger because I loved that role so much. But I loved Clive Revel. I had the album. I played it all the time as a little kid. I thought he was hilarious and sad and funny, And so cut now to like a few years before this Star Trek thing, I'm doing another TV series and we're looking for a villain. And who walks into audition but Clive Revel?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm usually very cool in casting sessions. When I meet actors, I meet a lot of actors I like and I bring in a lot of actors I like, but I don't let them know that I'm fans at the time because it's got to be professional. But with this guy, I totally broke. And I started gushing to this guy about how much it meant to me, how it changed my life, how I realized that acting and the theater and creativity and it had such a huge impact on me. And he looked at me like, whoever you are, disappear out of this room. I never want to see you again. Because I realized this is the guy who's trying to get a role, and he doesn't want to be thrown out of the mood he's in to play this villain. To have this guy just tell him, at the time I had long hair down to my shoulders. I looked like a freak. And it was the most disappointing thing. So
he looked at you the way Picard looked at Q when he showed up in his office.
Yeah, exactly. So when I realized that Clive Revel was playing, Sir Guy of Gisborne, and he was going to be there that day, I did not go over to him. I didn't say hello. I didn't want to, I could not have another broken heart of being dissed by this guy. But what were the chances out of nowhere that he would role, for that part? So that's the other thing I remember about Qpid.
Watching this episode, the one major note I wrote about this fellow, Clive Revel, was that no matter what frame I paused it on, he had an incredible expression on his face, like 100% acting 100% of the time. And it was like I kept pausing, take little notes, and every time he's making an amazing face. I'm like, this guy gets it. This guy is good. This guy
good.
Gives his all. I would love to see more of his work.
Yeah, I mean, and let's face it, the truth is he was too old for the role, right? By that point, he was in his late 50s, I think. I mean, it could have been a younger, agile, thinner guy, but it didn't matter. He could play. He played it. He sold it. So that
plus he had a younger guy's wig on, the hair was young.
Exactly.
Ira, I want to ask you about this set, and you talk about having walked on and seen this set that's constructed for this episode. And really, my question is, when you're budgeting these episodes and you have to put on an expense, like it looks like this is a lot of an expense to add to an episode. Do they take away from other episodes and then put it into this one? How does that work?
Well, absolutely, that's what happens. And that's what we had down to a science at Star Trek, which you can't do anymore, it seems. You can't do a really expensive episode and then tell the powers that be, don't worry, we'll make it up with other episodes. At the end of the year, it'll all, if you do a big episode, they freak out on you so much. But at Trek, we had that because they knew we were doing full seasons. We weren't going to be canceled, and they trusted us. How much of that set was smoke and mirrors, and it looks great on TV, but clearly, there's a lot of movie magic going on. Though I do have to say that at the time, I remember feeling pretty good when I was there. I was impressed that they had gone the extra mile. And one of the things about the episode that I was satisfied with was that set.
Yeah, well, it's really hard to fake something like that without kind of giving it a lot. Like a castle looks very different. Like you could maybe get like, a room or two, but if you're trying to show a courtyard or something like that, you really kind of have to give it a lot or it's going to be distracting.
Hey, at least they didn't shoot it in a cave. That would have been the
Well, was
usual.
it?
Well, it looks like a castle, kind of, but then they back in Robin Hood days, they actually lived in caves.
It was a cave castle. Yeah, and then it looks like the also the exterior scenes with war fighting, the horse. I mean, that's all done on location, or what?
I was at Discondo Gardens. I think we've used that. That's a place where we've done other things.
Is that near Pasadena? I think Pasadena.
Yeah. I believe so.
Yeah, so you're doing an on-location shoot. You've got the castle being built. I mean, this is an expensive episode, and actually, one of the things jumped out at me was this is a lot of work to do for one episode in in a season. It looked like the work had been done to really get this right. And it seemed like it was something they wanted to get right, which I feel like it was done. It passed my visual test. I thought this was very fun. I know you have some criticism of it, but I was watching it with a smile on my face, kind of like the whole time. It felt. You mentioned a vacation. Writing the episode was like a vacation for you.
For sure.
It felt like a vacation for me watching the episode. So the vacation translated through the script. It felt fun.
I just wish it had an energy that the show lacked, that the show needed. It didn't have the lightness of an adventure story. It was very stolid, and shot like, back in the day, back in season 3, my big mantra was, and you might have heard this, Sirach, when I've talked about it in the past. I used to say, this is like Bonanza television. We're shooting this show like it's the 1950s. It's the 1980s, and it looks like something from the 50s. Every shot is these cowboys, waist high people. The camera never moves. People walk into frame, stop and say their lines. Everything's so static. It broke my heart at the time, and watching again, it still did at a lot of level. I mean, it didn't break my heart, but I just felt it was a missed opportunity, and I think someone like Alan Craker or Jim Conway could have taken that material and probably given it a little more pace, a little more energy, than the show had.
Well, what this episode did have, though, was comedy. I was laughing throughout. Now, I'd seen this before, so I knew what to expect. But like with everything else, you watch Take Me Out to the Holosuite, and every time you find something new that's funny that maybe you didn't fully appreciate every single time. And this one, again, my notes are just full of ha-has. I'm just laughing throughout the entire thing. And I'm thinking, man, Ira, when you were writing this stuff, were you laughing to yourself or were you thinking like, I hope this plays?
Well, I think, to be honest, what I was thinking of was, this is going to get made. We can actually make this thing. And, chances are, the other thing I remember is the opening scene. See, memory plays tricks on you all the time, especially when we're talking this. I know that after I handed it in, and then I was busy, and I told Mike I couldn't do any more. I wasn't going to be able to do any rewrites. I had other things I had to do. I know. I thought there was this. I thought the show started for some reason with Picard giving the speech to the archaeology conference,
Delegation,
but it
right.
doesn't. It started with the scene with Troy. I don't think I wrote that scene. I think Michael wrote that scene after I had handed in the material. I don't remember who I was there before, but I remember him calling me and saying, "Well, I just want you to know, full transparent," because Michael was such a good guy. He wanted me to know I'm gonna, it needs a new beginning. And I said, fine, whatever you want to do, be my guest. So I know that scene he wrote. I'm not sure. I have a hard time remembering. I know all the Bosch stuff and Q stuff I wrote. I don't remember the scene when they all suddenly become Robin Hood and disappear. Don't know. I know the first scene was not mine. Was Michael's.
Actually, it wasn't even my favorite scene, to be honest with you. The first scene was my least favorite of the scenes, just in full transparency, because I felt like it was slow. And that it didn't. I mean, the thing was moving so slow in the beginning with no dialogue at some points, just moving and watching Picard think and deliberate. And I just felt like this episode could move a lot faster with the story.
Well, also the whole stuff with 10 Forward and Riker and Vosh. I mean, it was just very, very lugubrious. There was no, it's like when Riker says his line. Number one, you set Riker up sitting there, which you didn't need, and then they're standing there like statues, the two women, and then supposedly looking out the window, and then Riker comes walking into frame and says his line. Oh, yes, it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, you could have had that line off screen, surprise them. He walks in, you realize it's just so cookie cutter, by the book, explain everything to the audience. Look, a character is entering and now he shall speak. It's not the most creative way to tell a story. And that's all through that opening, even the stuff between Picard. Now I'm going into my rant, which I apologize to all the listeners. It's been many years. I have not seen this episode. Even the stuff with Q and Picard is so static in some ways, and there's no interaction. And I realized that Jean-Luc keeps himself, his emotions reined in, but it's the same thing every time, and there's no ups and downs, and he doesn't get really pissed off and then calms himself down. It's just so you're just waiting for something to happen. The repartee doesn't sell it enough for me. You've seen it before. Anyway.
Yeah, I wasn't so much against the cute Picards. That what I really enjoyed was the Picard sitting at the dinner table with Vosh, and then the awkwardness, because we rarely see Picard in his awkward modes where he feels like very uncomfortable. And it felt like when Crusher walks in on him,
that was
like
so good.
he's like
Yes,
he's busted.
That was so good.
It was
Yeah,
I
see, that
loved
was
it.
some real emotion. That was like human interaction, how people actually behave,
Yes,
And so I agree. I thought that was a nice moment.
Yeah, I
it was
loved it.
great. The
And
him
I'm
saying
surprised.
no, yes. I just as he was so uncomfortable, so
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
I'm a little surprised that you're kind of hard on it, Ira, because I was laughing the whole time. I thought it was now. Of course, I already knew what to expect, so I don't know what it was before being shot. But and by the way,
Right.
everybody at home that's like me, don't worry, I took care of it. I looked it up. Lugubrious, looking or sounding sad and dismal. That's what that means for everybody
Yeah,
that's
thank
like me.
you.
But yeah, that scene with when Crusher walks in, we're just laughing because we know, like, we've all kind of been there in Picard's shoes,
Yeah,
and we're
that
just like,
feeling.
oh boy, here we
This
go.
looks
I do
this
not want to
looks
be
bad.
Picard right now.
Yeah, but think of how it ends. Think of what could have been that last scene between Bosch and Picard. That push pull of her going, him wanting her not to go. It's just not there. They just don't play it. It's the least passionate goodbye. It's the least. It's like, oh, it's the end of the episode. Next week we're going to have a new adventure, so I can't really get bent out of shape. Even the kiss is kind of like, that's not a goodbye kiss.
Yeah.
If I was kissing a woman goodbye, if I was kissing my mother goodbye, I'd kiss a more, you know, feeling kiss than that.
But what they did do was they had the tension that they have with back and forth, because that whole, you guys are acting like you're already married vibe. I felt that between the two of them, it did have the kind of already married argument stuff. I'm not going to change. Well, you can't change me either type of stuff. So there was a lot of good chemistry stuff that I enjoyed. But Worf, by far and away, I thought you must have had the most fun writing Worf's lines, because these are classic lines. Worf gets to steal the show in this episode several times.
Yeah, I meant to, I still have the greeting card that they made. I am not a married man. My kids freaked out. They could not believe that they were selling, like, at the CVS and the Rite Aid.
Yes.
There's Worf's face in his Will Scarlet, and you open it up. I am not a married man. It was like my kids were very well. My son wasn't even born. I realized my daughter was very impressed that that there was a card from Dada.
Well, that line just jumps out, and it's just the way he delivers it with that outfit. I mean, it's perfect for Worf. I thought this is great writing for Worf, and this is the kind of stuff I'm sure Michael Dorn likes to do, where he doesn't have to. He just gets the one chance to deliver that punchline. Like the whole take the mandolin and smash it, and then the sorry line
Yes.
right after that.
Well, that I just did as an homage to the Animal House with Belushi.
Really?
But, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes to the detriment of the show, especially when it got to Deep Space Nine and all hell broke loose, and we were able to throw in whatever we wanted to at times, which is sometimes a good thing and sometimes not. I just, I had that imp of the perverse that I wanted to just do stuff that you'd never see in a Star Trek episode, So the idea of
Geordi
Worf saying a line or doing something that Bluto did in Animal House is so, it just doesn't compute. So I just wanted to have that moment. I thought you could get away with it, and I wanted to give Geordi some business. It was difficult to find. I felt horrible for Crusher and Troy once they were. There was nothing for them to do, and they, they didn't give them swords to fight because they were women. So I guess they could in the do any actual fighting. They could hit people over the head with pottery, but they couldn't actually to like they.
Yeah, that's a
So wherever
stereotype
I could find a little something, I try to give them some humor.
Well, we do have to jump to our break in just a second. Ira, I don't know if you can stick around a little longer, but
yeah, I whenever I do this stuff with you guys, I always kind of give myself a longer bit of leeway.
Very nice.
I know. So
right.
I have.
All right.
I have
well, thanks very much. So everybody stick around because there's something I definitely want to point out to Ira, and it is that this episode may be the most memed episode of any Next Generation one. But we'll jump on that in a moment. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton and very special guest, Ira Stephen Behr. So here are the trivioids of the week, everybody. The Enterprise is to serve as a host for the Federation Archaeology Council's annual symposium. Picard will be addressing giants in the field of archaeology like Switzer, Clark, Tarn, Droth, and McFarlane. The Tagans no longer allow outsiders to examine their ruins. Lieutenant Worf thinks Vosh has nice legs. The Tagans really knew how to party 2 billion years ago. Jean-Luc isn't the only reason Vosh is going to Tegas 3. Deanna Troy's bow and arrow aim is improving, but Geordi's mandolin strumming is not. All right, so let's get back to this. And by the way, Ira, we really appreciate you, your work, and your generosity with your time on this second segment. Thank you so much for that. But Sirach,
thank you.
This is the last time I'm going to be on the Seventh Rule, as far as I know. This is it. I mean, I'm not going to be on any more TNG episodes. I'm not going to be once. I'm sure you're doing Voyager or Enterprise. I'm not in any of those. So
no, we're
everybody at home in the comments below, give us an excuse to have Ira back. We got to get.
Oh yeah, we got to bring it back.
But Sirach was talking about that this third season. Sirach, you made a good point that you have mentioned this before that. It kind of has been leaning more into suspense and horror, right?
Yeah, I felt like in the middle of this season, especially the last 3-4 episodes, we've been feeling, the vibe has been this, Halloween special kind of horror, creepy music, and you never know what's going to happen, vibe. And then this comes to me and I see, and it feels like a real breath of fresh air to have a different, away from this ship episode, an adventure episode. And ironically, usually I don't like Q episodes, but this one I like because it's just enough of him where it's not unbearable for me. I feel like, okay, sometimes he's over the top and it's just like, okay, we can't have the monologue every time, Q. but it was enough of him this time to set the premise and get the story rolling. As in a matter of fact, I didn't know what this episode was when I started watching it. I thought, okay, this is a delegation episode. This is one of those diplomatic episodes. Then it went into Vosh creeping up in his, how'd you get in here through the window stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is a Vosh love episode. And then Q comes in and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? What is this episode about? But I loved it. And I really did feel like I was going for an adventure, Ira. Mm-hmm. That's why I wanted to mention it was a breath of fresh air.
Well, the only episode I had seen that season is Ron had called me and asked me to watch Family. Is that the name of it? Where he's so that's the only episode I had seen of season 4, which felt like, an episode that had built on what we had been trying to do as best we could in season 3, which was try to get a little more, character and emotion and things. So I thought that was a really nice episode. But I didn't know what the hell, the show was doing at the time. So like I said, Michael, this was all Pillar, doing his Pillar thing of trying to, keep me close, and we were going out to ball games at the time together and stuff like that. And like I said, I just needed a vacation from my day job, and just the idea that to know that I could write this episode and they could film this episode, and I was and in a a nice kind of contained amount of time. Meanwhile, the rest of my life was stretched out and more rewrites and more meetings and more trying to make this person happy and that person happy. And so yeah, that part of it was fun. So
What was your mindset, Ira, at this time? Now you just finished. You say you weren't on the show, so you had already left the third season. You come back to do this one episode here. Uh, are you thinking you're done with Star Trek at this point? Like, are you thinking I will not see another Star Trek script, or I will not work on another episode?
if you really want to know the truth of what I was really feeling,
All right.
was I guess I was feeling guilt about Michael, because Michael was a friend. As I've told you, they tried to get me on the show in season 2, and I turned it down. And then in season 3, Michael was on the show, and I had known Michael previously, and we were friends. And so I came on the show, and at the end of the show, at the end of the season, I quit. I quit on Michael, and I felt bad that I, was part of the exodus that left. Because friends don't quit on friends. But I didn't feel I was quitting on Michael as much as I felt the show was not giving us what we needed creatively and everything else. But I felt really bad, and I was still friends with Mike, but there was this guilt of so that's the main thing, Sirach, that I was feeling. So to come back, if he's going to ask me to do an episode, I wanted him to know that I still loved him. I still, I was still friends with Ron. There were no bad feelings. It was strictly a business decision. It was like The Godfather. This isn't personal. This is business. So the chance to come back and help him out, because clearly, whatever was going on in the season, which I don't think was in any kind of trouble compared to season 3, but he wouldn't have gotten in touch with me and asked me to do this unless he felt, it was going to be a kind of episode that he knew or thought would interest me or whatever. I could not say no. I didn't want to say no to Mike on anything. So that's really why I did it. A sense of I owed him, something for having left.
Right. And was this like a one-off type thing? Were you thinking I'm going to help him out? And
No,
I
was done. And I mean, we've discussed this, Rock. I mean, when I went to whatever that ball game, Dodger game was, when later on, or the next year, I guess it would have been, or maybe, I don't know, I'd have to look. And he brought up this new show, and suddenly he had this whole thing planned out. I mean, that's the thing that kills me. That's the thing that still to this day, we went to a game, we've been to other games, we're just sitting there, and suddenly he starts talking about this show that they're going to do. But he's not only telling me about this show, this new show, but he's telling me there's going to be a black captain, or that they know, that it's going to be on a space station, that he wants me to come, that he used the word, it's going to be closer to my sensibilities, which is like my sensibilities, they hated my sensibilities in season 3. They fought me every step of the way. I'm thinking my sensibilities. And after 2 seasons, he's going to give me the show. I mean, all of this in one day, at one game.
in one conversation.
In one conversation. It was insane. It was like, wait a second. I did one episode in season 4. It's now probably season 5. And So that was the last thing I ever expected. I felt
Mhm.
good that I was able to write this Cupid episode for him, and kind of, you know,
So your sensibilities, I mean, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but from my own perspective, this Cupid episode, as fun as it is, as many laughs as I got, it's still the next generation, right? And it's their vibe of whatever they do. Your sensibilities, when we see when we see you at work on DS9, and we see the complexities of the Dominion and the way you write these really complex and very elaborate characters that are sometimes as devious as can be and sometimes as heroic as can be, but towards your sensibilities, I feel like it's less of a joke and more of, let's get into some real serious discussions about stuff. I think that's what he meant about your sensibilities. About, I'll give you a chance to just go wild and talk about things that you want to talk about, as opposed to doing the kind of hokey stuff that.
well, I don't know about that. I mean, I do regret that I never really. It boggles my mind that once we were doing the show, I never sat down with Michael and said, Mike, let's go over that night at the ball game. You know, how did that come about? Why did you think of me? Why were you so certain that you could just give me the show and that I would run with the show that hadn't even been cast yet, hadn't even, it was, I don't even think at that point the script had been written. He gave me the story document, uh, but I don't even know if the script had been written at that time. I never asked him, what the hell was going through your mind? What made you think that Rick would even agree to it, after having left the show? It's a regret I have that I never
Mm.
sat with Michael once and said, let's go over that. What was going through your mind? I mean, I have to tell you, if someone, you know, when 5 years into the run of the show, when uh Robert Wolf left, you know, that was hard. I thought, man, you've come this far. Don't you want to come to I never said this to him because I don't want to put him on the spot, but he knows how I felt. And I know it wasn't an easy decision for him, but it was like, whoa, you know, whoa, don't you want to complete the house that we were building? But Michael didn't seem to have that. It's like we left in the middle of the best of both worlds. It's like, who gives a how it's going to end? You figure it out.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
figured out part one. I'm not going to. And yet that didn't seem to faze him. He was like, we're gonna work together again. It boggles my mind. He was a special guy. He had his own way of looking at things. And what's insane is how right he was. How he knew that is, my sensibility. That's the thing. It's like, I,
Well,
I,
that's the clue. I think you mentioned before, you said you were friends, you hung out a lot. He clearly knew the type of man you are, and the type of personality you have, and he felt like you would be the person that would be best entrusted with something that he felt was valuable to him, which is an idea that he wanted to see manifested. And I believe he had the exact intuition to pick the right person in you, because obviously you did a fantastic, phenomenal job with the show. But yeah, I trust in Michael Pillar, and his instinct was always, he was such a loving guy. He came from a loving place, and it was like if he gave criticism, it was because of love, not because of trying to tear you down and make you feel, not capable. But I have really good memories of Michael. Like I said, it starts with love. Um, but yeah, back to this back to this episode. So you're in the fourth season. You get this call. Uh, Let me ask you: the Picard with facial hair. Now, he is that a call on his part, or is that how it's written in the thing?
I just think, again, Michael was the first day I ever met Michael Pillar. I think I've told you this probably. I was working on the very first show I was ever on, and Michael was a censor for CBS. And he came around because I guess, though we didn't say it at the time, he told me not long after, but he wanted to be a writer. And he kind of, being a censor, you don't get a lot of respect, let's face it, from the creatives. They don't want to see you. And he was walking around on the lot, and he came into my office, and behind my desk was this big, poster of Errol Flynn as Robin Hood. And he goes, "Oh man, I love that movie. You loved," and that's how we first started talking, was about, you know, Robin Hood and Errol Flynn. And so clearly, if he was going to have Picard be Robin Hood, he was not going to have a clean shaven, he was going to try to do the
Yeah.
best he could to mimic and mirror that character, which is why the Lincoln Green, and that was why that happened.
So that's crazy. So you meet through Robin Hood, then you write a Robin Hood storyline for the character. You go to baseball games and you write a baseball game. I
Yep.
mean, I'm starting to see a trend here.
Well,
You're taking, yeah.
the baseball game, like I've said before, was, I had done it on Fame. We had done Take Me Out to the Ball Game on Fame, and it was like it was a chance to do it again, to do another baseball show, basically the same show, which is why I didn't write it, because I didn't want to steal that much from myself. So that's why we had Ron do it. But yeah, I mean, baseball and Michael and I, that was one of the big things that we shared, that we had in common.
I
So for
love
two
that.
guys so different, we had a lot of stuff in common.
I love that story when you're talking about, going to baseball games and like talking business at a baseball game. Like it really paints a picture. It really, makes me look back at the times. Not that baseball games aren't around; some very big ones are happening right now. But like, it paints a very nice picture in the history of Star Trek of like what was created, at two seats at a Dodger game at night. But let me point out a couple of the memes that I mentioned earlier, which is obviously the Merry Man one. Like that is on cards, it's on memes, people quote it all the time. I mean, you just type in, Merry Man, and it's just kind of like everywhere, everywhere you look, there's just Worf Merry Man stuff. And everybody, these are like huge moments, especially and Worf bashing the mandolin, and Vosh and Picard. The thing is, you made such iconic scenes, and I can't help but wonder, like, if you were during the creative process, if you were trying to really kind of like visualize or picture or think like this is going to get them or this is going to work, or if you're just kind of like letting your creativity flow and just whatever comes out on the paper comes out.
Well, I without, making the audience want to barf, I was thinking very big at the time, because I was writing a feature where one of the things they kept bugging me about was, you got to make it bigger, you got to make it bigger. And I'm saying, it's about character, it's about character. And it's like, no, we need more action scenes, we need bigger thing. So I was thinking, so when I wrote Qpid, I was thinking, 1938 Technicolor, big adventure, lots of extras. So in my mind, it was epic. Obviously it's not epic, but I know they tried, and that was nice. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Well, I was laughing throughout. Sorry, go ahead, Srock.
I was too. The nice legs, and then for a human, that had me rolling. Um,
It would have been
you
nice
know,
to see her legs, Rock. You know, if the shot had shown her legs, and then you see him looking, and you're wondering, then nice legs. That would have been funnier, actually.
I have a one. I did have a funnier line that I would have added to this episode actually while I watched it. And Ryan, you just cut to the scene that
Right, with
I would have
Data getting
the scene with
shot.
Data where Data gets shot with an arrow. The only thing that I in my own little mind was writing, adding. I was doing a rewrite, I guess, as I'm watching. But when he says none of my biofunctions seem to be affected, I would have had him repeat that line as a joke, right?
That's funny.
Yeah, that would have been good. Yeah, that would have worked.
That would have worked right there.
Yeah.
Boom.
And
Just
then
say it
Troy
twice.
goes, Jordy, can you check on Data, please?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
funny.
That was my only little ad because I love that scene. I love, the episode had me rolling. What actually had me rolling too is I feel like when you're writing, you get a chance to actually sometimes take shots at people. And I felt like you through Q's voice are able to take shots at characters. And Worf, for example, Q says to Worf, you'd make a perfect throw rug at Nottingham Castle.
So funny.
That was classic, just great shot. The other shot that I thought was just hilarious. It was very subtle, but it was hilarious. When Q says to Picard, dull, plotting, pedantic, much like yourself, when he's talking about this speech. I thought that was another just cleverly written shot. So kudos to you, Ira. I was rolling while I heard these lines.
Well, yes, Q does give you the option and the opportunity to comment.
Yes.
He is a wild and crazy guy, and the crew are not wild and crazy people. So yeah, that was an opportunity.
That's funny. I understood that reference, the wild and crazy guy one. I didn't pick up the Animal House one until you mentioned it, but I got that one at least. So we're just about jumping over to the free-for-all, everybody. But before we do that, Sirach and I have a job to do, and that is the home run of the episode. Sirach, who gets the home run of today's episode?
Well, I'm going to give the home run two home runners. Ira, you're getting a home run for writing this episode. Like I said, inside I was smiling the whole time. I felt like I was on a vacation. Sometimes when I'm watching episodes, my attention gets taken away somewhere, or here I want to do this, I want to straighten up something or whatever. But at this time I was engaged, and it had me locked in the whole time, even though there were certain, choices that I thought could have been made differently as far as camera wise. But I was locked in with the story, and the comedy kept me going. The awkwardness was great. So Ira, I'm going to say, gets the home run. And as far as on screen, the home run I would give to Sir Patrick Stewart. I loved him being awkward. I loved him having those, challenging Q when he had a chance to. I thought he carried the script very well, and the chemistry that he has with the Vosh character really plays well to be. So Patrick Stewart.
Sirach and I are in sync here, lockstep. Obviously, Ira Stephen Behr gets the home run of the episode. I mean, you're a little hard on things, Ira, but man, this is an excellent and one of the most famous and popular and known episodes in Star Trek history. Everybody loves it. Everybody talks about it. I know, sounds crazy, but I was laughing the whole time. And the throw rug line that Sirach just mentioned. I don't remember that line. I felt like I heard it for the first time. It was hilarious. Secondarily, yeah, Patrick Stewart was great, but he's been really solidly good, especially for the last, season or two, when the writers kind of started adjusting to him and letting us kind of laugh and see the subtleties that he can bring. He's really good. But what I didn't really notice when I was a kid watching these for the first time was Jennifer Hetrick playing Vosh. She's actually really good. She's very charming and charismatic, and it's never easy to just come into as a guest star and really kind of walk around like you own the place. And she's really good about that. So she gets a home run as well. Here are some people that also get home runs that do walk around like they own the place, by the way. And their names are, especially Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Moeller, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu and Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, The Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manosfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, Chris Sternett, Dylan Powell, Peter Draymore, Chris Garris, and of course, Jason Oken and Greg K. Wickstrom out in Hawaii. All right, everybody, we've got the free-for-all. Everybody let Ira know in the comments or on social media how unbelievable this episode was and how much we appreciate him always coming to say hello and give us his thoughts and tell us things that nobody has known for 30 years. This is really cool. Ira, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
And everybody stick around. We've got the free-for-all up next. We will be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Seventh Rule. This is the free-for-all with Sirach Lofton, and Ira Behr is hanging out with us still. What a champion. Melissa Longo is here as well.
Hi.
Eve England is out in Wales. Oh, she's got her new Seventh Rule shirt as well. Look at how cool this looks, Ira, by the way. It's like Ramones style. How fun is that?
Nice.
We thought of you. Anil O. Palat is in Berlin till he goes wherever else he's going next. Allison Leach Hyde is here as well. Cool shirt as well. Gregory Kenzo's got a cool Cisco shirt made by Melissa. Carrie Schwent is wearing a London shirt, but I think she's in Wisconsin. Chris Garris is in South Texas in a car. And Chris McGee wearing an awesome Goonies shirt. Thank goodness for that. Astoria. Awesome. Okay. Here's where it gets crazy. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
Yeah, I'm going to say that this episode was probably like an 8.5.
Does anybody else have any guesses on that doesn't already know of what the nerds voted for this on IMDb?
6.8. 6.8. 6.4. Somewhere in the sixes.
8, 9.
I'm gonna pull a Susan
Nine,
Gruner
my ass.
and say 10. Oh, sorry. But I mean, I just
gonna
want to
say
say 10 because I
7.9.
love this episode.
7.9 from Eve. Anybody else have any
Just get to
guesses?
it already.
I believe it is and by believe I mean I'm just stalling to check the notes, 7.2, which I was actually surprised by. I was like, this is such a popular episode. I thought it'd be in the 8s easily. Also, any non-appearance mentions? I didn't catch any. Or some kinds of, or some sorts of Chris McGee.
Not today.
Satan. All right, well, let's just jump into this then. Melissa Longo, will you please get us started off on the right track and tell us what you thought of this particular episode? Did you love it?
Yes, it's fun. It's a fun episode. This is what I miss about new Star Trek are these standalone episodes where it's not really about dire consequences or the universe is going to explode and one person is there to save the day. This is just a fun bottle episode, day in the life. We get a little character development, and we get the awesome line where Worf says, "I am not a merry man," which is hilarious. But it just seems like an episode where the characters have fun. They let their hair down. Picard, we rarely see him relax. So it's fun to see him have a love interest finally. And because I enjoy a bit of romance, watching a bit of romance, and especially with Picard, who's always has a stiff upper lip. This is nice to see him, let his hair down like in Captain's Holiday. So it's just a fun episode, not too serious, not to be taken too seriously, and just, have a gas.
Oh, haven't heard that term in a while. Thanks very much, Melissa Longo. Good stuff there. Eve England is out in Wales. This is her first time watching The Next Generation ever. So it's first time watching this episode. What do you think of it?
Yeah, so it was fun to actually see this famous episode that everyone keeps talking about. And I obviously knew about this quote from Worf. So it's actually quite interesting just to see the actual context of how on earth such a quote and this costume ever materialized. So that was really good fun. So like I said, I mean, it was a bit of a silly episode, but I actually really enjoyed watching it. It was a good piece of entertainment. I mean, I would actually disagree with Melissa, though, in terms of Picard sort of letting his hair down. I just felt that poor Picard had like the worst day ever. He was so looking forward to the presentation, and then first his pesky ex-girlfriend turns up and just causes chaos, and then he has to deal with Q and go back in time and deal with all of that craziness of the Robin Hood storyline. And and we know how I'm having a journey with Picard and whether I like Picard, but this is a moment for me where I genuinely felt sorry for him and felt that poor Picard really deserves a break in this episode. So I thought I was really glad by the end that he sort of got through it, but really disappointed that he never got to do a speech. So I thought that was a bit sad. And the only other sort of thing that I really liked, and I'll let Carrie mention it because I think Carrie might talk about this, but I just thought it was absolutely hilarious that they just used the same screenshot of Nottingham Castle from Robin Hood's Prince of Thieves, which is obviously not Nottingham Castle. So I just thought that was hilarious.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much, Eve England, out in Wales. Anil Opalat, what's up, man? How you been? What do you think of this one?
Good. Yeah, I think like a lot of people like this episode, and I think if the season were only 10 episodes, I probably wouldn't like this one, but because the season we have so many episodes, we can get these kind of fun diversion episodes. So I think that's why it's great. Also kind of humanizes Picard a little bit. We know he's uptight, but we kind of get to see maybe why. And I know there's an episode later on which kind of really explains why he is so distant from the crew. And also just one thing that I really like about this episode is when Beverly, before she, I guess, rings the doorbell or whatever, his face it's such great acting in that without any words, just to see his face change. And I love those small little moments that really add, color to this episode that make it really great. It's just watching Jean-Luc be uncomfortable. So that's fun.
Picard Must Suffer episode. Thank you very much, Anil O. Palat. Allison Leachhyde has never suffered a day in her life, but what do you think of this one?
As I will continue the theme of it is a fun episode to watch. I always forget how long it is before we get to Sherwood Forest. Mm-hmm. Whenever I think of the episode, I'm like, oh, we just go straight in. I'm like, oh no, we actually have over half the episode of preamble before we get to go watch everyone be merry men, and whether they like it or not. And so it's always like two completely different episodes. First we get the like weird romantic comedy kind of going on, and I loved Beverly and Vosh. I thought it was great because Vosh is kind of being a little snippy, and Bev is just kind of like trying to play with her to make Picard super uncomfortable. Because he could have just explained that, oh yeah, we have breakfast, like every twice a week or something, and today is one of our days. Like we're two coworkers with, a little bit of, a little extra something under that, but they're not doing anything about it at this point. So love that. And that's probably the highlight because Bev in that blue sweater, she's gorgeous. Mm-hmm. Enjoyed that. And what else can I say about this other than I am sad that the ladies didn't get to use swords because they were the once trained in sword fighting.
Oh,
And it's not like they didn't put them in men's clothing anyway, so why would it have mattered? So that's my big nitpick.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good point. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Allison Leach Hyde. All right, Greg Kenzo out in Hawaii, enjoying beautiful weather in the morning sun. What do you think of this one?
So I did say it was a 10, but as Allison pointed out, the ladies did not use swords, and I did think that they needed swords. So 9.5. They could have done better, but given the time it was created, I mean, in actuality, I would probably put it a little bit lower, but I want to give it a 9.5 because of how fun it was. I love how these Q episodes, they break up the patterns of speech kind of that Starfleet has. Q has this way of talking that's it's melodic in a way that, well, it's John Delancey really, where it's like it's up and down, and it's almost like a song. Worf smashing the loot and Troy's archery with the pan over to Data, the scene behind me, I laughed out loud. I did not remember this episode at all, and I love seeing that comedy. That comedy that works so well wasn't speech. It was sorry, what's that type of comedy called? Doesn't matter. Okay. Well, yeah, it gets us out of the normality of the ship life and out of the Starfleet life,
Mm-hmm.
and I just love how they could have done better, but they did turn this Robin Hood story into more of a feminist feature with Vosh kind of she had agency. She's like, I'm not just going to sit here and be, executed. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get out of it. And so, yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah, she was smart, cunning. Thank you very much, Greg Kenzo out in Hawaii. Carrie Schwent, what's up, Carrie, aka Crafty Bear? What'd you think of this one?
I love this one because we all know how much I love Q. So we've got to have tiny Q hang out. Absolutely, so much fun. I love Q. I love all the different versions of Robin Hood. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves came out in theaters 2 months after this episode aired, and that's probably one of my favorite versions. The other one being Robin Hood Men in Tights, which Patrick Stewart comes in at the end playing King Richard the Lionheart. Such a fantastic scene at the end of that movie. If you've never seen Robin Hood Men in Tights, go watch it. It is absolutely hysterical. I love the Camelot would have been okay, but I like that things got switched to Robin Hood because you could just have so much more comedy moments with Robin Hood that I think you could probably with Camelot. Camelot always felt more serious to me. And yeah, laugh out loud moments beginning to end. Beverly and Vosh were just enjoying watching Picard squirm. They were enjoying him. Yeah, they were very much enjoying him squirm. Data was so adorable with the arrow in his chest being all sweet, like, yeah, he tries to help her confidence. Your aim has gotten better. And he looked, of course, awesome in that. Everybody looked amazing in all of those outfits. Hugh, especially, his Sheriff of Nottingham outfit, fantastic. And his hair looked even better than it normally does. At least I thought it did. And of course, every single second of Worf in his outfit. He was not enjoying himself very much, unfortunately. For everybody else was enjoying it. And if you look, actually, that reminds me, if you watch the scene or the clip where he is saying, "I'm not a married man," look behind him at Geordi. Geordi is already laughing before Worf says his line. So they definitely went through a few takes of that if Geordi is already laughing. And as much as I like Vosh and Picard, I really kind of like Q and Picard. Sorry, Freudian slip. I love Q and Picard. That's not what I meant to say. I like Vosh and Q. Their chemistry is really very interesting. They're very much birds of a feather. I feel like it made sense for her to go along with him, and which actually brings in the background behind me. her going off with Q is kind of like whenever the Doctor recruits a new companion. Come with me, see all of time and space in my TARDIS. Although Q doesn't need the TARDIS, but there is a episode of Doctor Who that uses Cardiff Castle here behind me in an episode called Robots of Sherwood, which features kind of a Robin Hood sort of storyline that adds a very interesting sci-fi twist to it, which I really enjoy. Now, before introduction of the limerick, I very much relate to Picard going over his speech, second guessing it, talking to Troy about it. Time to time with my limericks, especially early on when I first started them, I would ask Eric about them from time to time, not sure, like second guessing. Do I really like it? Do I not like it? Bounce it off somebody. Yeah. Sometimes you need that reassurance that what you've created actually is okay. So I'll have Q hang out with me here while I recite the limerick, because of course this is Q's limerick. Why do I find this woman intriguing? It's clear she's good at all kinds of scheming. She's not right for my friend. He will bore her in the end. Then it's my company he'll be keeping. Thank you, Q. You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. Thanks very much, Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. Chris Garris is
Ryan.
Yes.
Since I'm going to be leaving shortly.
Yeah.
Does anyone have a question that I can answer, or has a question for me? And you guys can review this to your heart's content after I'm gone.
Nice.
Greg, but if anyone wants to ask something while I'm here, please do. That would be my.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Greg, what do you got
I would
for
love
us?
to ask you a question. How much of a part of this process of writing this were you? And how was the writer's room? I'm guessing I didn't really look at the writers on this one, but I'm assuming because you're here that you took part in
He
writing
is the
this,
writer.
right? Okay, you are the writer of this one. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I should have taken a better look.
Yeah. What was the rest of the question, actually?
So how was the writers? If you can remember, I know you did so many, but this one.
Well, I wasn't on the show at this point. This was a freelance I did for Michael. Michael called me. I was doing something else. I was actually writing a movie at the time, and he asked if I'd come back and do an episode. So I came in as a freelancer, and just was doing Michael a favor. And
what inspired you to do a Robin Hood episode?
It was originally a King Arthur original story, which I never actually read, but Michael wasn't thinking. Michael thought it wasn't working, and so he called me and said, "Would I want to come in and do a favor for him?" And he said, "If you like the King Arthur thing, we can still go with that, but." We were both fans of the Errol Flynn Robin Hood, and he thought maybe that would be a better, way to go. And so that's how that came back.
Nice.
So I came in, had a couple of meetings, wrote the script, and that was it.
Cool. Chris Garris, you got a question for Ira too, right?
Yeah, I was just curious. So I guess you didn't get to really work with John Delancey on this episode, but what was it like working with him when you had him on DS9 though?
It was fine. I mean, John does what John does as Q, so that was it. From the jump, it was not the most comfortable fit, I thought, for the show. It was, not that I didn't like the episode, but I really, we really wanted to get away from too much leaning on the TNG characters and formats. So it was, we never thought about bringing Q back again after, because Cisco just wouldn't put up with him. Like
No,
I
he
said
wouldn't.
earlier, obviously the big bromance that they never dared to do on TNG would have been between Picard and Q, because obviously Picard had the hots for Q more than he had for Vosh. And they couldn't do it at the time, but now that would be the great romance. So
Well, thank you.
there you go.
Carrie, you've got a question, right?
Yeah, it was something I read on Memory Alpha about the war smashing the mandolin. It was inspired by a scene in Animal House, which I've never actually seen, so
Yes, it
not much of
was.
a reference for it. But it's such a great scene.
Yeah, it was just part of my, what are two things that people would never think of in the same thought, which is Animal House and Star Trek: The Next Generation, and how do we find a way to blend that and break that abyss, cross over that abyss between those two ideas? So yes, so that was a deliberate addition that I put into the script as an homage to Belushi and Animal House. So there you go.
Anybody else?
If you don't.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you think this episode kind of paved like the way for you to hop more into Star Trek as a full-time writer? Because later on you become more of an active writer. You said you freelanced this one, right? Like,
well, I had been on season 3 and quit after season 3.
Oh, okay.
But I was friends with Michael, and Michael asked me to come back and do him a favor and write the episode. So I wrote it as a one-off. I thought I was still done with Trek and never thought about ever going back to Trek again. I was just doing a friend a favor. But Michael had this thing in his head for some reason that he'd get me back on the show. So when they did Deep Space, the first thing he did was talk to me about it and see if, try to lure me back in.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he did.
Yeah,
seriously,
can you imagine?
Yeah.
DS9 is my favorite. I have to tell you that while you're here. Well, I can talk to you.
Yeah.
It's my favorite Trek. That's why I joined.
Yours too. Well, Ira, we really appreciate your time. We know you got to go.
Thank
It's been so cool.
It's been an honor, sir.
All the best
Yeah,
to you,
good
sir.
to see you all. Sirach, big hugs. Love you. Hope to see you soon. Ryan.
Say hi to Laura too for me.
I will. Yeah. She says hi, Melissa and Ryan.
You got it.
I don't know when I'll be back on the show. This is it. But,
we love you.
We'll see about
that. Have to make an excuse.
I can't think of what that would be actually at this point.
We'll see.
I don't have much of a say on the rest of the seasons of TNG or Voyager or Enterprise. I just didn't watch them. So be well, everyone, and we'll talk.
Thank you so much, Ira. Appreciate you. Take care so much.
Bye, Ira.
Bye.
All right. Well, that was fun.
That was
great.
My favorite is when everybody pops on, they see Ira, they're like, "Oh my God, it's Ira! This is so cool."
I was a little starstruck, but
yeah. Okay, so where were we? Chris Garris.
You were doing mine.
What's up?
Yeah.
What'd you think of this one?
So I'd seen it before, and as everyone says, it is a fun episode. But I think kind of why I gotten that lower score just a little bit is because, you do have about 20 minutes of build up till you get to Sherwood Forest.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, the writers had Picard going back and forth between, is he happy to see Vosh, not happy? He's embarrassed, and she points it out, and then he feels small again. And he's, but then when he goes to, so he's like, I'm not embarrassed, but then he goes to her quarters to apologize. And, he's real timid when he's, he rings the doorbell and she's like, "Who's there?" Picard, or, and whatever. And he just, and then he said, I'm not embarrassed. Well, you kind of act like you might still be a little embarrassed, but I get it. He's the captain. So what did make this better, I liked about it is, and again, it's because we've now had Picard season 2, they were able to kind of tie it back as to now we do have a better understanding of, why he has issues with relationships due to his mother's death. And what I thought was interesting is how Q's meddling has actually, allowed him to start, so that he can love people and show it out, instead of just being privately, he can show it, somewhat publicly. And I think someone else may have made a comment, might have been Allison, but yeah, Vash and Q, perfect together. And then they have the little spat in DS9, but they're still good. And yes, I did have to. I felt so bad for John Luke when Beverly came in. Just his face. I could just feel. I could feel the pain for the poor man, and so yeah. But I can only imagine what those two talked about when they left.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Chris G. We call him Chris G. Chris McGee, what's up? What did you think of this one? You're the Dark Lord, by the way.
Oh, really? I didn't know. So, of course, it's a fantastic episode that I love. Well, I can't deny it. And one of the absolute highlights of season 4, in my opinion. So I apologize ahead of time if I just pile on with the gushing. After all, it's such a wonderfully lighthearted story that gives us so much, such as seeing Jennifer Hedrick again after her debut appearance as Vosh in Captain's Holiday. And as I'm sure has already been mentioned, her departure with Q at the end of this episode leads directly into her appearance on Q-less in DS9. Also, obviously, seeing Q again played delightfully by John Delancey, with another reference to an episode from the previous season, Deja Q. And as is often the case, Michael Dorn gets the best comedic lines of the episode. In fact, he gives us one of the most memorable quotes in the entire series, which has already been quoted many times here, so there's no need for me to repeat it, along with one of the best comedic moments with him smashing Geordi's mandolin and handing it back with, sorry. I love the costumes in this episode, and Jennifer Hedrick's Maid Marian dress is lovely. It was quite a stroke of inspiration that they chose to keep that take of her stumbling in the dress, and her super long braids attached together at the ends is strangely memorable to me. I'll save my one nitpick of the episode for things left unsaid, and I'll go to the memorable quote. Boy, howdy, there were so many memorable quotes in this episode, obviously, of course. It was hard to pick just one, so I will just, but I was able to do it, and that one is oddly not the one you might think. It is it's actually several people have spoken it in the episode, and that is, the captain is a very private man.
Mm-hmm. Excellent work. Thank you so much, Chris, aka Dark Lord. Well, it's time for Jake's final take. Sirach, any final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, final thought is, before having seen this episode, I remember scenes from this episode because I think scenes from this episode are just out in the public domain. I've seen those various still shots. So I kind of felt like I knew the episode before I even saw the episode, which is weird, but that was one thing. The other thing is, I felt like the hallway in the Enterprise looked a little bit different. Felt like the wallpapers or something was a little bit different to me. It felt like it was where they had Bosch's quarters. That hallway that he was walking down seemed to be upgraded or updated or modified in some way because it didn't look the same as it does before. So that was one thing that jumped out to me. I thought Worf's outfit made him look like a pimp. which was hilarious to me because I easily see him pimping with that outfit on.
Yeah.
And he can still say the same line, "I'm not a married man," because that would be, a pimp's life. But
I'm not here for a pimp.
yeah, I see Worf the pimp in that outfit. It's hilarious. Let's see, what was else? Oh, when Worf runs up to like sword the guy on the horse, whatever his name is, the guy who was supposed to the main villain, Sir Guy. Yeah.
Guy,
I called him the guy. So yeah, the guy on the horse.
Hey, guy, that's Sir Guy to you, bro.
That's Sir Guy. I noticed that everybody else was huddled together in like a 10 shot or a 6 shot while he's over there fighting this guy on a horse. And I'm like, nobody's going to help, or like, they're just all going to stand there and watch. Like, oh, he looks like he's got it from here. I thought that was weird. Like the group you come with kind of at least, hey, stop, or something, trying to do something, like just standing there watching in a 6 shot together, all huddled together, shoulder to shoulder. So looked weird to me for some reason. Bosch sitting in the captain's chair. There's a moment there where Worf is like, that's your girl, bro. I didn't even want her here. I was like, she's not allowed on the bridge, bro. But and so her being in the chair, that's not on me. That's on you. And kind of Riker does the same kind of look, like, she wants to sit in the chair. Let her sit in the chair, right? And Picard even kind of like has a moment where he's about to say something, but he's like, okay, I hope you're finding it nice, or something to that effect. Which is funny because right after that scene, Q is sitting in his chair and he's like, get out of my chair. And I'm like, you do hate people sitting in your chair. You just held your tongue when Bosch did it. So also, I came up with a name for the couple with Q and Bosch. I think their couple name, like, Benefer or whatever, I think their couple name would be Q. So that's Q. That's their couple
what that
name.
makes me think of?
What's that? Yes. That's their couple name.
Yes!
And that's their name in sign language. Q, right?
Amazing.
And then I guess my last thing? Oh, my last thing is when Picard's in her quarters and he discovers all her archaeology equipment. One of those things looked like a metal detector or something or whatever. Like it looked really clunky and not. It looked like something I would design for Halloween this year. It didn't look like that sophisticated of archaeology equipment, right? So that's my final thing.
That's good stuff. Well, Sirach, I was hoping you'd love this episode. Every time they were making funny lines or funny scenes, I kept thinking of you. I was like, okay, Sirach's laughing at this one. So it's nice to know that you had fun with it.
I did.
Thank you to Chris McGee, Chris Garris, Carrie Schwent, Greg Kenzo, Allison Leach Hyde, Anil Palat, by the way, Eve England out in Wales, for Melissa, myself, Sirach, Aaron Isenberg. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. Thank you so much to the King, Ira Stephen Behr. We will see you next time. And until then, always remember. Oh, and sorry, and Carrie's Q. Always remember the 7th rule.